Hello and welcome to another episode of the Two Charlottes Spill the Tea podcast. This week's episode, we're going to kind of follow on a little bit from what we spoke about last week, where it comes talking about fears and overcoming them. But this time I'm going to pass over to Charlotte, where she's going to talk about kind of some of the stuff that she's experienced in her life and some of the fears and stresses and trauma situations that she's been in, and also how that's kind of manifested itself now in later life into kind of like physical illnesses and stuff like that. So I'm just going to hand over to Charlotte to chat to you.
Hi, thanks, Charlotte. So carrying on from what we spoke about last week, when we were actually like prepping the last week's podcast, and we were talking, about we're gonna do fear. Fear is something that everyone kind of suffers with, and we want to talk about that. And we kind of went off to do our research and our preps. And it occurred to me that I couldn't really think of any one situation in my life where fear was something that I had to push through. I knew I had to do XYZ to get through to the other side. I felt like my life was just constant fight or flight. I felt like I was in fight or flight, living in fear for years. And I couldn't figure out when was a time where I actually got through one part of fear and had that breathing space to relax afterwards. And I said to you, I can't really think of one significant thing that happened. I feel like it was years for me. It was years of living in fear. And that's when we kind of started talking a bit more about how I am now in my 40s in a much calmer place dealing with chronic illnesses, which I believe are stress related and are due to spending so much of my life in such bad situations. So I suppose, again, like for me, things started, I mean, they probably started before the day I was actually kicked out of my parents' house, but that was probably a factor in me, you know, coming up to a situation that was scary and not knowing how I was going to get through it. When my parents kicked me out of their house, I was a teenager. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anywhere to go. Didn't have anything. I literally was kicked out of the house with the backpack that I had on my back. And that was it. And I remember sitting on, there was a monument in the town that I grew up in, and it was like the center of the town. It was a small town. There was a big stone monument, and I remember sitting on the side of the monument. It was like a big spire with steps up either side of it. So I remember sitting on the steps and thinking, someone will come out of the house and get me in a minute. Like, there's no way my parents are just kicking me out of the house. I've got nowhere to go and I've got no money. You know, well, I was just sitting there as a teenager, thinking they're going to come out and get me in a minute. And they didn't. And I sat there till it started getting dark. And then I was like, well, I'm not going back into that house after what happened. The way that I left my parents' house was violent, and it was scary. And, my dad hurt me physically. And so I didn't want to go back in there. I was scared, to be honest. I was scared at that moment in time to go back into the house without one of them coming to get me. So I walked around for a while and I thought about this place that I knew in the town where I lived that was like, I want to call it a bit of a hippie commune. It was called The Farm, and it was a massive farmhouse that like a bunch of kids, say 18, 19 years, maybe up to mid 20s or something, lived there. There was stables. There was sometimes people there that were like living in horse-drawn, like gypsy wagons. And there was just a lot of people that lived there that were kind of younger. And the guy that I was seeing at the time, actually, my daughter's dad, he used to stay down there quite a lot. And, there was a lot of people like smoked weed and there was parties down there and stuff like that. And I was like, I'll go down there. They'll be able to help me. And they did. They did help me. They were like, of course, you can stay here. So I stayed down there for a bit. And they couldn't believe, I had bruising around my throat and stuff like that from where I'd been kicked out of my parents' house. And they, just couldn't believe that had happened to me. They were really nice and they really helped me out. And from there, when we had to leave that house, I ended up living on a new age travelers site, as I spoke about in one of the previous episodes. And I was with my daughter's dad, and this was a very, very violent relationship. I'm talking heavy drug use from both of us, to be honest. Lots of drink and lots of violence. So again, I didn't have any money. I was living in a caravan at this point on the side of the road. The person that I was living with was very abusive. Now, I didn't really, it's funny, I was talking about this earlier with my husband, right? And he was saying to me, why would you want to go on a podcast and talk about this kind of stuff in your past? Like, it's private. Why would you want other people to know this about you? And I said, why would I not?
Mm.
Why would I not talk about this? Like, I didn't go through this to bury it in the back of my mind and pretend it didn't happen. I went through this because, and I said, there has to be some good to come from everything that I went through, because I'm not a bad person. I didn't deserve everything that I went through, but I went through some really hard times. And I believe it's because I've got the internal strength, the mental strength to have gotten through it and come out the other side. And I believe it is my duty to share this story with people, so that if someone else is a teenager or a young person in a domestic violence situation where they feel like they're going to die, their life is bleak, it's miserable, they're alone, they're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they're scared, and they don't feel like they've got anyone to turn to. I want to be one of those people on a platform that people can listen to us for free, and I'm going to be one of those people that is going to talk about it, because domestic violence is huge, right? There is a lot of it out there, and I'm veering slightly off topic, but I will come back. It's a topic that we don't talk about enough, because I believe, from having experienced it myself, I know that when my partner at the time used to hit me and talk down to me and hurt me in the ways that he used to, I felt like it was my fault.
Yeah.
I was ashamed to tell anybody, because I thought everyone would know what an awful person I must be to make someone want to hit me. I was embarrassed to tell anybody in case they thought badly of me or thought that I was a bad person. I was very lonely. I had no one I could talk to about what I was really going through. I didn't really have any friends, and I was put down so much mentally as well. I was constantly told what a worthless piece of shit I was, and that people didn't like me. It was only because I was with him that people put up with me in the first place, and no one cared. No one cared about me, and I believed that to be true. My parents kicked me out of their house. My own parents did not want me in the house with them. They didn't want me around. They didn't want me seeing my brother and sister. My own parents didn't want me, so why would anybody else? Why would anyone else want me? Why would anyone else believe me? Why did I think I was worthy of anything? Or like, who even dared I think I was? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I felt like nothing. I really did. And I felt like probably maybe I might deserve to die at some point in time, because I was worthless and I was rubbish. And I feel like I can't be the only person that was in a domestic violence situation that's thought that. And for me to have gone through all of that, and to just put it in the back of my mind and not talk about it to people that I don't necessarily know. It's not something that I'd necessarily talk about with people I know. It's not the kind of thing you sit down on a Friday night and have a good chat about, but it's the sort of thing that I don't want silenced. And I really believe this with every piece of my being, that if we silence survivors of domestic abuse, we're doing the entire world a disservice, because this goes on behind closed doors more often than we even know about. And people need to know that you can get through the other side, and your life can be everything you dreamt it could be and more, if you're strong enough to just find that bit of help and to speak out about what you're going through. So back to the point of where I was going with this. I was actually with this man for nearly 8 years. Had a baby with him. The whole having a baby thing was probably one of the most traumatic things that I've been through as well, looking back with retrospect. At the time, I honestly feel like I spent a good 10 years of my life in a daze. Like things happened to me, but I just went through the motions, probably was dealing with a lot of PTSD, um, and, undiagnosed mental health problems, ADHD, etc., etc. And I didn't really have, I never had any counseling for the violence that I experienced at his hands. And I was hospitalized many times from what he did to me. I was raped by him, beaten by him. And like I said, there was a lot of drugs and alcohol involved, and he would be completely out of it most days. And I never knew what I was going to expect. So that whole time frame of being with this person, and having a baby, my daughter was 10 weeks early. So we were in hospital for a long time. When we came out of hospital, a week after we came out of hospital, she caught meningitis, and we were back in hospital for another 4 weeks in intensive care. I was told to expect the worst. I even had a therapist, kind of counselor person, come into a room with me in a hospital to look at baby coffins.
Oh, Jesus.
And that was just like I said, I was there and I lived through it, but I feel like I went through the motions. I don't really feel like I understood how I was supposed to feel. I remember the first time I saw Maya when she was born. Um, she was in intensive care. She got taken off of me when she was born. I had her in one hospital, and she was airlifted to a different hospital because she was so premature. They didn't have the facilities to help her in that hospital. So there was an air ambulance waiting to take her. I couldn't get moved with her because I had complications after the birth. So I was in surgery and I couldn't go to her till the next day. So I remember going to the hospital where she was, sitting in the intensive care room. And I remember looking at her, and I remember thinking, I don't feel it. This overwhelming rush of love that we're supposed to feel when we look at our babies for the first time. I don't feel anything. I remember thinking that. I remember thinking, am I a bad person because I don't feel anything? Like I know I'm not going to leave her. I know I'll be here every day, but I don't feel that connection because, I never really had that connection with her. I didn't even see her when she was born. She was gone, took away from me, gone. They gave me a Polaroid. So that was all, that entire part of my life, I'm going to say 10 years of my life, that went by in some kind of crazy blur of constant high stress, constant high stress. And if I wasn't stressed, it was because we were smoking weed or taking something to blot it out and to have a good time, to just have a good time. Because the one time when I wasn't hungry, frightened, lonely, or scared, or something bad was happening to me, was when I'd had a few smokes or I'd done a pill or something, and I felt that euphoria and I felt loved for a moment, chasing a high, chasing a feeling of acceptance whenever I could, wherever I could with that. Now, I never had an addiction that I would say. I don't have an addictive personality at all. I could pick something up, take it, never take it again. I could, do something one day and never do it again, or I could do something every day for a week and never do it again. I didn't have any issues like that, but I did have a bit of a want to be loved and to feel accepted. So I did chase highs quite often.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose that's where I went with the next few years of my life, when I met some beautiful people, some really lovely people. And I'm still very good friends with most of them to this day, where we used to go to a club at the weekends, and it was just such a vibe. Like, the people that I met there, the friends I made there, were the nicest people. And after I got the strength, in fact, I got the strength to leave Maya's dad because of her, because he lost it one day. He came back from being out and he absolutely lost it. I was in my house. I'd been given a council house. Maya was 6 months old. She was upstairs in her cot. It was late at night. I feel like it was probably a Friday night, but I honestly don't remember. And I was sitting downstairs with a friend of mine. He was a long-time friend of mine, someone I'd known since primary school. So we'd been friends for years. And we were just chilling out, sitting downstairs, having a laugh and a chat and a smoke, probably. And then there was this almighty hammering on my door, and it was Maya's dad. And I looked at my friend and I said to him, "What do I do?" And he was shouting and he was kicking the door in. "Open this fucking door. I'm gonna fucking kick it in. Open this fucking door, Charlotte, now." And I was so frightened.
Mm.
I looked over at my friend. I said to him, "What do I do? What do I do?" And he's like, "You've got to let him in." I was like, "Oh God, I have, haven't I?" And I opened the door. And as I opened it, he hit it and the door flew into me. He launched at me, punched me in the face. And I remember my feet lifting off the floor. My nose broke completely, blood everywhere. I remember watching the blood flying forward out of my nose as I was flying backwards. And I hit the wall the other side of the room. He hit me that hard. And he came in and he launched into me. And I had the worst beating of my life. My friend was terrified. He was only the same age as me. This guy, Maya's dad, was a lot older than me. I don't know what happened to him. I just knew that I was probably going to die that night. And he kicked me, punched me all around the living room. I managed to get upstairs, shut myself in the bathroom and lock the door. And I was thinking, what do I do? Where's my phone? Shit, my phone's downstairs on the floor. Can't ring anyone for help. It's downstairs on the living room floor. Maya's in her cot in the bedroom. And this guy comes up the stairs, punches a hole through the bathroom door, grabs my head from the other side and starts pulling me by my hair backwards through a hole in the door. Bang, 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 shouting at me. I had to make the decision there to unlock the bathroom door and to face him again
Mm.
because I thought he's going to pull me backwards through this door. He's going to rip my hair off my head. I didn't know what was going to happen. So I unlocked the door. He came in and he chased me into the bedroom. He picked up a TV, threw it across the bedroom at me, glass smashing everywhere. This was the bedroom that Maya was in as well. I only had a one-bedroom house. 6 months old, she's standing up crying in her cot, right? And I just had to get him out, away from her, away, right? So I grabbed the duvet, rolled in it to try and protect my body from the hits that was raining on me. Rolled down the stairs in a duvet, well, got half kicked down the stairs. I managed to get underneath the sofa bed, grabbed my phone as I hid under the bed. He couldn't figure out because he was so wasted how to get me out from under the bed, right? So I was on my phone texting every single one of my friends because I didn't want to ring anyone because it was like 4 o'clock in the morning and heaven forbid I actually wake someone up, but I really needed someone to help me.
Yeah.
So, I was just texting everyone, "Please help me. I think he's going to kill me. Are you awake?" And what he did then was an avid reader. I think I said this on a podcast before. I read a lot of books. So I had bookshelves in my living room filled with books, and I had a massive record collection as well. So I loved music. He just tipped them, knocked them over, tipped them into the middle of the floor, said if I wasn't coming out from under the bed, he'd burn me alive. From under the sofa, he'd burn me alive. And he set fire to it. And I was too scared to come out. So my living room is going up in flames. He's ranting and raging and shouting and screaming. And I'm wrapped up in a duvet, hiding under the sofa bed in my living room, waiting for someone to text me back. And I can hear my 6-month-old daughter screaming her head off upstairs. Don't even know if there's glass in her crib where he smashed the TV. Don't know anything. Don't know. And can't get to her because the second I get out from under that sofa, he's going to kill me. And I'm broken and battered and bruised beyond all recognition. Eventually, probably wasn't that long, but a friend of mine texted back and said, "We're on our way." So it was Maya's godfather, actually. Now, he's not around anymore, God rest his soul, but he turned up with a car full of people. They actually had to stick a knife at Paul's throat to drag him out of the house. He'd lost it completely, was on a cocktail of drugs and alcohol. They dragged him out of the house, got him in a car and drove him very far away. And another couple of friends of mine stayed behind, helped me clean myself up, helped bandage me up a bit, helped me pack a bag for me and Maya, and I left my house, left everything, and ended up going to live in a different town, different county, And that was that, right? So that was how I got away from him. That was it. I knew then, and it took me and Maya almost dying, but I knew then that I had to get her away from him. So then
No,
I
no,
kind of went,
I want to interrupt you. I just need to tell you how unbelievably amazing you are. Like I'm literally trying to stop myself from bursting into tears. That is probably the most heartbreaking story I've ever heard in my whole life. And the fact that you were able, because you know, you were young when you had Maya, like
yeah,
you were still a baby yourself.
yeah.
The fact that you were able to just
I was
one,
actually 18 years old when this happened.
that is unbelievable. Like genuinely, I want to cry for you, and I hate the fact that you now live in you're in a different country because I could actually really do with hugging you right now. But no, I think you are amazing. The fact that you've done all of that and you were able to be like, no, do you know what? What I need to do is I need to protect myself. I need to protect my baby. I don't care about anything or anyone. I just need to get away is probably the most courageous thing. Like, and I'm sorry
And
to
at the time,
interrupt,
I
but
felt like maybe I was letting Maya down. Maybe I wasn't doing the right thing because I was leaving a home and everything that I had.
no, but
You
you
know,
were saving her life. Like, God only knows what could have happened if you hadn't left.
to
Like
be honest, we were
genuinely.
very lucky. We were,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
this is one of those reasons why when we go back to our first proper episode, when we talked about spirituality, and I said, I believe I have been my own guardian angel. When
Oh,
I think of all those times and the healing that I have sent back to myself, the
yeah.
Reiki that I've sent back to myself as that little girl through all of those years of being with him. I mean, that was the icing on the cake that last time, but that was at one point every other day, something like that was happening when it was just me. And I stayed with that because that's what I thought I was worth.
Yeah.
And I stayed with that for years. And it wasn't until I had that little baby and I thought she cannot experience another minute of this, not another second.
No. And that, like, that in itself just shows the absolute strength that you had inside you, even after years of dealing with all of that abuse and trauma, you still
Yeah,
had the strength inside you to be like, I need to protect my baby.
yeah. And I need to get away. And like looking back on it now, it's just it's almost like a different person when I look
Mm.
back on it now. I mean, it is a different person. I look back on that person and I think, she would be so proud to see where I am in my life right now and what I've managed to achieve. But I spent a long time living with that level of stress. And then, when that was gone, I was still, I had a lot to go through.
Mm.
Yeah. I life was not done with me then. I mean, you would have thought that was enough, but no, 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 no. There was more to come. There was another very abusive relationship. Um, Quite soon after, probably. I mean, I probably shouldn't have had another relationship for a good 10 years after that one, but I did have another relationship. And although it wasn't as physically violent, it was mentally very abusive. So I was at this point really stuck in a cycle of not believing that I was worth anything.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, I did meet some really good friends and I was up, out at the club with them at the weekends. And I lived for those moments because when I was in the club with those people that I made friends with, and they always called me Rainbow and they were always so nice to me. And I just felt so loved by those people, by those friends. That's why I'm still friends with them now to this day because I felt so much love from them. And that was like something I never really experienced in my life until that moment. So those moments that I spent with those people meant everything to me. They were literally moments that I lived for. And I'm so grateful that I had that because those people gave me so much hope and they really did help me start believing in myself a little bit more because they were genuinely happy to see me whenever they saw me and they loved Maya. They'd meet her, they'd come out, we'd go out to the beach the days after we'd been out and we'd spend days together that were just amazing. I have to say, amazing bunch of people, an amazing group of friends. And I probably had 10 years of that. of hanging out with these people. But in those years, I again had another very abusive relationship, which I said, which was mentally very draining. And I had an awful, awful experience where I was spiked with Rohypnol in a pub, and I was basically date raped, dragged away in a taxi. And this whole experience, I mean, I happily talk about it, but I don't like to talk about it too much because what I went through with that makes people very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, you know, I bounced from one highly abusive domestic violence relationship to a relationship that wasn't necessarily physically abusive, but it was mentally abusive.
Yeah.
So you've got 10 years nearly of a mentally and physically abusive relationship. It was just hideous. And then probably another 3 years with a very mentally abusive relationship where, you know, I mean, I have, to be honest, this is something that I wanted to talk about probably on a different episode because I think it's slightly different. But when I say hurt people, I was a very hurt person.
Mm.
And it took me a long time to get over a lot of those insecurities and fears that were produced from being in a very toxic environment. So, you know, with my parents kicking me out, I had massive abandonment issues. You know, being in a relationship with someone who is horribly violent, cheats on you, you know, makes you feel like you're worthless, that does all sorts of terrible things to your self-image and your emotional head state and can make you a very paranoid
Mm.
person as well. So there was that, you know, coming from me as well. I mean, I have to question, at some point I have to question, was that relationship that I was in afterwards that was mentally abusive, was it mentally abusive because I was hurting and I was taking, you know, was I causing that? And I still don't know to this day. I
Mm.
still don't know. Did I cause a lot of my own problems because I was so hurt that I was, you know, hurting other people, being massively insecure, jealous, controlling, probably, you know,
And
I don't know.
quite possibly, yeah. Like obviously, I don't want to say that any of it was your fault because obviously no one ever deserves to be treated that way. But there's when you're in such a that headspace where you feel so insecure, you're so paranoid, you're so anxious, you're so hurt, you're so broken, you do and say things that potentially could
Yeah,
trigger these situations. And if you're
yeah,
in a relationship with someone who's also potentially in that same headspace, it's just like wildfire. And
yeah.
no
I
one
mean, it's just
deserves it, but it could
two
happen.
people feeding each other's
Yeah,
insecurities and toxicities. And I'm
100%.
sure that I brought some of that on myself. I mean, like you say, I know that I was, you know, my circumstance, I was a product of my circumstances and my environment,
Mm,
100%. Um, those abandonment issues from a child to being, you know, in an abusive, highly toxic relationship. And I mean, yeah, I was definitely a product of my environment. However, at some point, I have to take responsibility for the person that I'm becoming.
yeah,
And I have to decide, am I going to continue becoming a toxic person myself, or am I going to take responsibility for my own healing journey and start helping myself? Like that has to come onto my shoulders
yeah,
because, you know, nobody is going to heal me. I have to do that for
yeah.
myself.
No one's coming to rescue.
So yeah, exactly. So that is something that I've always, because I never really got any help from anyone, I mean, and when I say any help from anyone, don't get me wrong, I had great friends that really helped me. And I've always had great friends that really help me if I need to. You know, I've always had people that I could fall on. Um, and I believe that's because I have always prided myself on being an ethical person with high morals. I've always tried, even at my worst, when I was absolutely at my worst, and I wouldn't have wanted to have been in a relationship with me. I've always tried to treat people, my friends and people around me, with the utmost respect and morals and manners. I haven't always done it, and I hold my hands up to that. Like, I haven't always been the best person, but I have always tried, and I've always tried to right my wrongs. And I've never been like a thief or a cheat or a liar or anything like that. I've always held myself to a certain standard. And I think that's a lot of because that was how I was brought up as well. Like I
Mhm.
was always brought up that manners meant everything. Being polite and a good person was everything. So that's always been installed in me. So I think, I've got that to be thankful for as well. But getting massively off topic now, I want to veer back into fear. So we've covered basically 20 years of my life so far, right? Let's say from the age of 15 till 35, roughly. Okay, I've
Yeah.
missed out a few things for sure. But we can see that the level of stress that I've been under, from highly abusive relationships to very premature babies to very sick baby to again another highly abusive relationship to years on and off of kind of alcohol and drug misuse, chasing highs and things like that. It's been stressful, and it feels like it's been high stress the whole time. So there was days and nights where I was with my friends having a good time, but a lot of the time I was struggling with all of this trauma, all of these years of scars built up. In that time, I did move country in a desperate attempt. When I decided to come over to Ireland, I came over here on holiday with Maya in the summer, and we came backpacking. And I just met some really sound people, and I fell in love with the country. And I knew that where I was in England, the situation I was in, I was on benefits. Um, I didn't have much in the way around me of anything where I felt like I could excel in life. I couldn't get a decent job. Like I didn't have any childcare. Maya was too young for me to leave. I couldn't get a decent job. I couldn't afford the childcare. I felt like I was stuck in a circle, and, I was smoking. I was still drinking at the weekends. The people I knew all just wanted to party, and I wanted away from all of it. I
Mm.
really did. And when I came over here on a holiday, I was like, this is my chance. This is my chance to reinvent myself and to do better and be better and create an actual life for myself where I'm not looking over my shoulder, scared that, I'm going to bump into her dad, or something is going to happen, or I'll be back in that horrible place. So I made the decision very sporadically that I was going to move over here. And I did. That was it. I basically came over here backpacking for the summer, went home, packed up my house, and came straight
Yeah.
back. And I remember I rang my dad up and I said to him, I'm moving to Ireland. He said, when? I said, in about 20 minutes. I've got the moving van packed. I'm going. And he was like, what? Wait, wait, I have to say goodbye. Um, and yeah, and I came over here, and it felt, for the first 6 months, I felt like I was living in a holiday, and I got a job, and Maya was at school, and everything was like brilliant. And then I just suddenly started feeling very lonely because I had no friends here, I had no support system. I didn't know anyone, didn't know a single person over here. Just some, random people that I met in the summer. And I realized that they all knew people and had grown up with people. And I'd left all of that behind. I'd left everything behind. So the fear came straight back
Mhm.
again. All the fear of, oh my God, this is actually real. What have I done? I've made a terrible mistake. I've left everyone and everything. I've got no one. I've got nothing. Um, and I probably had about 6 months of feeling like that, and I slowly built my life back up again. Um, and I think the slower pace of life over here started to really help. And I had Max. Didn't know that I was going to get pregnant. The funny thing was that I was told that I couldn't have any babies after I had Maya, because they found out that I have what is called a, now I might not get this right. I think it's called a biocornate uterus, biocornate or biocornate. It's quite rare womb condition. So I have like my womb, and then I have another womb lining. So my womb has two linings to it. So the actual space inside is very small, and then it's also slightly twisted. So it's all messed up. So there's no space for a baby to grow in there, which obviously, coincidentally, is why Maya was so premature. And then Max was also premature as well. So I'd actually been told that I wouldn't be able to have any more children and that I wouldn't be a candidate for IVF ever because my womb was inhospitable. And
Lovely.
they also checked my ovaries and said I had about 100 cysts on my ovaries. So they diagnosed me with polycystic ovarian syndrome and said that would also make it harder for me to have a baby because my body isn't releasing eggs. What's happening is instead of an egg being released, it's growing into a cyst. So I was like, okay. So they were like, not only is your womb inhospitable and you're not a candidate for IVF, you also can't freeze any eggs because your ovaries are covered in cysts. So I was like, okay, well, I've got a baby, so I don't need another one. quite simply, I'm okay. And they even said to me, oh, is she yours? I said, yes. I did give birth to her myself. And about a month after that was when I found out I was pregnant with Max. So I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah, so then I was pregnant with Max and had him. And I suppose it's probably when my life started to calm down. So we're going back like 13 years. I started to slow down. I was still working very hard. So at this point in time, I had my own franchise with a fast food store. And I had 3 stores. I'd slowly build it up. So I had one, then I got another one, then I got another one. A lot of staff to look after, and I was working ridiculous hours. My daughter had gone back over to England to go to college, and so it was just me and my son over here, and I was probably working, I would say about 100 to 130 hours a week. So this is also very stressful, and running a business is highly stressful. Looking after staff, I couldn't have a day off. I couldn't. I worked my absolute backside off, and I missed out on a lot of time with Max. You know, he was constantly in someone else's care, and it got to the point where I was so tired. I was so exhausted. I had a serious car crash. Driving home from Max's dad actually lived about 2 hour drive away from where me and Max lived. And he would never do the journey to pick Max up or drop him off. So I would work my shift. Friday night, I'd have to finish early, which could be very stressful sometimes if it was busy. So I'd finish about 9, drive Max down to his dad's, get down to his dad's at 11, drop him off, and turn around and drive straight back. And this is after working all day through, every day in the week as well. So I was just so shattered all the time. And driving back from dropping Max off, I had a really bad car crash. I fell asleep while I was driving on a chicane. So it was like a mountain on one side of me and a steep drop down to a river the other side of me. And I bounced, the car spun. I don't think I flipped it, but I bounced from one side of the road to the other. By some stroke of miracle, the first car that happened to come across me was an off-duty fireman. And he stopped his car sideways across the road a bit further back, had a friend with him. They had high-vis jackets, so they started stopping traffic. They got another car stopped further up the road, helped me out the car. My car was smashed to pieces. I think I was knocked out in the crash, but I'm not sure. But I definitely hurt myself. How I walked out of the car, I don't know. And actually, the police came, ambulance came. The policeman, one of the police that was there that drove me back to the station, rang me because I said I didn't want to go off in the ambulance. I was kind of just really strung out, to be honest, after it happened. I was like panicked and freaking out. Didn't want to go in the ambulance. I'd gone around a corner. When the police rang me about a week later, they said that what had happened was there was some gravel on the road. So as I'd gone around the corner, I'd spun out, lost control, and the car had just gone. But I know that I shut my eyes. I know I shut my eyes. I was so tired. And he said to me, we just wanted to check really and see if you're okay because we've never seen anyone walk out of a crash like that. And that was a bit of a wake up call for me. And to be honest, I haven't really driven much since then. It really put me off driving. Again, another thing that I've never really had therapy for or counseling for. I've just had to pull myself out of a lot of this. So the whole point of all of these stories is for me to get back to the thing of fear. So when we talked about doing this, and I said to myself, I can't really pinpoint one particular time in my life where I battled through fear because my entire life was spent in highly stressful situations. And if it wasn't the situation I was living in where I was being horribly abused, it was a situation I put myself in from working myself to the bone to try
Mm.
and provide for my son and my daughter. And it was incredibly, incredibly stressful for, yeah. So, like, I'm now kind of coming up to my mid 30s. And this is when I decided that the shops was not for me. I left all of that, got out of that. And I decided that, I was going to be single for the rest of my life. Didn't need a relationship. I needed to be on my own in a safe little space somewhere and just relax and take things easy because I was just run down all the time. And about, I don't know, a little while later, anyway, I met my now husband, who'd also, weirdly enough, reached that point in his life where he decided he would be single forever. And we kind of met each other and we just healed each other. And that's really when, for me, so the past 6 years really has been the point in my life where I've been able to really relax and to understand what it feels like to be loved and accepted and to, be safe and to be happy, real, like genuine happiness, and to have a very stable home for Max to grow up in and to just really feel at peace. And it was at that point in my life that I started to realize that my body was not right.
Yeah.
And I did not feel good. And I didn't know why. I'd spent all of this time and I said to my husband, I don't get sick. This isn't like I don't really get sick. I'm strong. I'm mentally a strong person. I can push through. I've done it myself for years. I'm not having this. I'm not a sick person. But chronic stress can cause problems in your body years before any lab tests or anything will show any result. And things can be going on under the surface for a very long time. And what happened was, first of all, I got diagnosed with IBS. So my stomach would play up a lot. And I'm not surprised because I basically, for a long time, lived a very dodgy life where I went long time periods of time without eating. Then when I did have a bit of money and I, could afford to feed myself and I didn't have to kind of beg on the streets for scraps of food, I was a massive coffee drinker and I was on the go all the time. And although I left the UK and I left behind the lure of weekend hedonism and that sort of thing, and I, gave up smoking and everything else, um, I was I was still suffering with very bad stomach a lot of the time and a lot of problems. So I was diagnosed with IBS. And then I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So, hypothyroidism is an autoimmune disease. And basically, my thyroid attacks itself. So, your thyroid is in control of every single cell in your body. Nothing happens in your body without your thyroid helping it happen in some way, shape, or form. So when you suffer with hypothyroidism, it's because your body is not producing enough of a thyroid hormone, and everything slows down. And I mean everything. Hypothyroidism causes numerous other diseases and issues in your body. So since being diagnosed with hypothyroidism, I was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is chronic widespread pain and fatigue and exhaustion. Because of hypothyroidism, I also have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. But high blood pressure and high cholesterol are respiratory diseases that affect your heart.
Mhm.
And this is a known factor of living with chronic stress. One of the things that chronic stress does is cause heart disease.
Yeah.
It also is shown to cause cognitive impairments, anxiety, depression, and it aggravates neurological dysfunctions like Alzheimer's, stroke, heart attack, and things like this. Okay, so chronic stress can actually shorten your lifespan, and you do have an increased risk of heart attack or diabetes if you suffer with chronic stress. Um, Autoimmune diseases are thought to be a product of too much cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. When you live with chronic stress, your body creates elevated amounts of cortisol,
Mhm.
which causes many problems. And we all know that stress is bad for you. It is bad for you. You only have to get stressed out one time to know that it can give you bad headache. It can make you feel miserable. It can make you feel depressed or, down. And I think I lived with chronic stress for at least 25 to 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
My life was highly stressful. And I feel like now my body has calmed down from it all. I'm in this place where I am now dealing with the physical manifestations of that stress affecting my body for so many years. And that in itself is actually quite stressful because
Yeah.
I'm finally at a place now where, I'm chill. I'm good. I'm in a really good place. I always say this to people. It's one of the statements that I love to say to people is that I am now living a life that I only used to ever dream about. Like I
Yeah.
never thought this would be my life. I used to dream about having a life like I live now, where I'd have a house, happy kids, and a husband that loved me. And that was something that was a fantasy to me, and I never thought would happen. So I am actually living my dream life right now, right here, right now, this day. And my body is just going, God, now we finally get to relax. We don't understand how to, and we're broken.
Yeah.
We are broken. Years of stress and living in fear and fight or flight and high cortisol levels has left me. I am 100% sure that the reason I have hypothyroidism, fibromyalgia, high blood pressure, IBS, high cholesterol is because of long-term cortisol from high stress situations and inflammation in my body. And you have actually done a little bit of research into this, haven't you?
Yeah, so funny enough, it's like it's crazy how things line up when you start looking at stuff. But when we started talking about this and how you thought that these, conditions were linked to stress and trauma, I listened to loads of podcasts, like podcasts are my thing. And I then stumbled across now three doctors over in the States that have looked into this and basically are kind of advocating for trauma being the cause of X, Y, and Z. And a lot of them are basically saying the same things that long-term stress and trauma can cause, illnesses and diseases, premature aging. But also, there's a lot of people that are, or a lot of doctors, one in particular who I absolutely love is Dr. Gabor Mate. Like I could listen to him talk forever, but he has a really strong connection between childhood trauma and addiction, which to me makes sense, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. She's in California and she's actually advocating for trauma-led healthcare over in the States. So,
That's incredible.
which I think is amazing. And they're actually looking at, this happened to you when you were a child, and now you're suffering with this. And, they're now looking at it as the kind of mind and body are one unit rather than being mental health and physical health. It's
Yeah.
now looking at it as connected, and like it's amazing when you look into it. And I go down a bit of a wormhole sometimes when especially some of the podcasts I've been listening to about how your mental health comes out in your physical health. And that's, it's just kind of proof in obviously everything you've been through and now everything that you kind of suffer with. And I know when I feel stressed or under pressure or in those kind of high intensity situations, there are parts of my body that stop working. Like my back is one of them. My back seizes up, my hips seize up when I'm in that kind of environment. Um, so there is this direct link. But yeah, there's these three doctors, which I'll happily kind of link out in the notes of the podcast if anyone wants to kind of look into what they're doing. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment in the world of like medicine. Sadly, at the moment, I can't find any doctors in the UK that want to actually talk about this kind of stuff. It's looking like it's very much in the
An
States, but
American.
hopefully it will come to us eventually. And it's actually really interesting to see the repercussions of trauma and stress on the body physically.
Yeah, it's funny when you were saying that, I remembered, I think I spoke about this in the spirituality podcast we did, but I remembered um, when I was probably in my 20s, early 20s. It was when I moved to Gillingham. So it was after I had Maya, but it was when I was living in a different house to the one where the very bad thing happened in with her dad. So I think she might have been a little bit older. I've always been, as you know, a very spiritual person, and I do believe that my connection to that is what has pulled me through a lot of the dark times. But I read a book called From Medication to Meditation, and it was by a guy called Osho, and he is like he's a has his own kind of, I don't know, do you call it religion or way? I suppose cult is probably more like it. But yeah, he had some very strange ways. Like he was very much into, like sex and the body and things like that. But this particular book I wanted to read because I was, trying to get into meditation and didn't really want to be using medications or, any kind of toxins and things like that. So he said a line in this book that I will never ever forget, and it's stuck with me. And I wonder if this is what helped me get through a lot of the stuff that I went through. He said to me that disease, and he didn't say it to me, he said it in the book and it stuck with me. But he said, disease is a physical manifestation of dis-ease within the human psyche. So
Wow.
any disease can be treated when you find the cause of the dis-ease within your soul. And you can do that through meditation and learning yourself and learning who you are. And that really struck a chord with me. And
Mm.
I don't remember a lot of lines and things from books that I've read over 20 years ago, but that one I have remembered. And you can quote me on that as well. That really struck a chord with me because I do believe, I mean, I don't even believe it. I know that I have a very strong mind, and that, my strength of mind has got me through an awful lot. And I think we were talking about it a bit earlier when we were saying about, even placebos
Yeah.
and how a placebo can have the desired effect, which means a lot of it has to come from your mind.
A lot of it, I think, is psychological. And doctors, and
Mm,
obviously we could go off on a completely different tangent
yeah,
here,
we
but
could.
um, maybe for another podcast. But doctors definitely put a negative connotation around the placebo effect and psychosomatic, feelings from things. But if it is a case of you take this sugar pill, I'll tell you it's going to cure all your ailments, and then in 2 weeks you feel like you could, conquer the world. Surely that's a really positive thing. Surely
Yeah,
that's a good thing. Like
that
that's
should be
what
used.
we want to be doing. Like we don't want to be taking medication to feel better. We want to
Yeah.
be taking, nothing to feel better and having our
Honestly,
bodies
if
and our
I could
minds to
find
live.
the parts of me that fractured and caused fibromyalgia,
Mm,
hypothyroidism, IBS, if I could find those parts in my mind or in my body and fix them, I would do that. And if that meant someone invented a sugar pill that was the cure all for these things and it worked, I would be all up for that 100%. I mean, when I think about it, it does make me a little bit angry that someone put me through a lot of crap and I'm now dealing with it still. Like I
Yeah.
have to deal with the physical manifestation of that, even though mentally I've come to terms with it all and got over it. My body is, you know, is suffering. And I do believe the reason why I'm suffering from these things is because of the trauma that I went through. I really do.
So yeah, just kind of, ending that conversation, like I'd be really intrigued to see what everybody thought of it, what everyone's like ideas are on this topic. Like, do you feel like you have these, illnesses and ailments now that could be potentially linked to stress and trauma? And, what do you think of that as a concept,
A
really?
precursor to
Yeah.
getting those kind of things. I'd really like to hear from people that maybe suffer with autoimmune diseases or things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, IBS, hypothyroidism, rheumatoid arthritis, anything like that, and just be interested to hear if you've had, long periods of trauma in your life or childhood
Mm.
trauma or anything like that that it may have come from.
Yeah.
And yeah, what people think about that. Um, the issues of living with fear and chronic stress.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be interested to see if we can connect the dots on more situations to,
Yeah,
there's a lot of findings obviously that I've, found in the research, but it'd be good to hear what everybody else is thinking and feeling. And has that kind of made sense to you as well? Like, have you now listened to this podcast and gone, oh, hang on a minute, maybe that's why I feel like this, maybe that's why I have that.
yeah,
Has
yeah,
that made that connection for you?
yeah. And
But
as always, we will leave, I think you said you were going to leave links to the doctors
yeah,
that you referenced as well
yeah,
in the description.
yeah, all of them have, loads of ways of, reading their works and content and stuff like that. So I'll link out the stuff that is relevant to, to what we've been talking about today so that people can come back.